Hey, thank you very much. Yeah, I am Mike Nevins at the Center on Community Living and Careers and part of the Indiana Secondary Transition Resource Center. And this is Kathleen Hardy Hansen too. We're both with that center. Thank you very much for coming on to this session. We do all kinds of resources and projects and supports for educators in the school system, all revolving around transition and transition IEPs and things like that. Today, yeah, we're going to talk about including transition age youth in the school and community. And as we start, if you wouldn't mind, I just always get curious. Well, it looks like we have a good group here where everybody's from. I don't know if you've done this before, but on Zoom, if you go up to your controls, there's that circle there, the annotate button. If you click on that, you can click on a stamp and a heart and just click on that map. You'll be able to control the map and just click on where you're from, what county you're from, real quick. I just like to see that. It kind of helps knowing everybody we're talking to. And I checked it. It should be on there. It should work. I think you can see the screen now. What I'm doing, I click on annotate, then you can put a check mark or a heart and just click on it like that, and it should show you where you're at. There we go. I see everybody getting on. Well, there's a lot of drawing there. That's fine. You can be from all those counties. It's okay. Oh, Florida. Somebody. Oh, that's awesome. I wasn't. I was just thinking Indiana. I wasn't thinking. I should have made the whole country too. I'm sorry. Yeah, if you're from another state, just kind of, you can write it on there.
We have several people from different states.
Awesome. I was using this from another presentation, truthfully, that I just copied over, and I wasn't thinking. I should have used a bigger amount. Couple from up north, the one from Florida, almost in Cincinnati there, Melissa, looks like. I'm that check mark in the middle. I'm in Johnson County. I'm just a little south of Indianapolis. Heidi's from way up there northwest. So that's good for some. Thank you. I just like kind of using that, getting a general idea of where everybody's from. And if you're not able to, sometimes there's other things with controls that might not work. So if you're not able to, that's okay. Why is it doing stamps everywhere on me now? Oh, and it's keeping everything on. That usually doesn't happen. We'll just go on with it and maybe it'll be off. But what we're talking about today is transition age youth. And as I started, I wanted to kind of a few definitions. So whenever we're talking transition, we're usually talking transition age 14 to 22. And that is the transition age in the IEP in the sections that we do. Whenever I talk about school transition age, I'm going to be talking about students from the ages of 14 to 17. And then in post-school transition age, a lot of schools are developing neat transition programs, things like that. And we're talking about students aged 18 to 22 in general. Sometimes there's kind of combined there if the student stays an extra year in high school, but in general, those are the ages we're talking about. To start off with talking about the issue and the problem. What is the problem with trying? Why isn't it easy? Whenever we're talking about students, it's supposed to be easy, right? So what's the problem if this is easy? So if you'd like, feel free to put in the chat, or you can also go to menti.com and put in that code and you can answer this question. But what are some specific issues that you see that make it difficult to include transition age youth in the school and community? And feel free to use the chat. Or you can go to menti.com and type in that code and you can put it in there too. Somebody in the chat I see says lack of resources and information. Yes, but a lot of times whenever it is that support that we need, and from resources and information to get to help out with that. What else makes it difficult in including youth? Transportation, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. Transportation is one of the biggest things that always block community inclusion, because transportation, and my other one that I always think is lunch, because fitting in the lunchtime and making sure students get that, because you got to somewhat fit it in a regular school schedule, and also the transportation to get there is huge. And we will talk a lot about transportation. Limited resources in the community. And it's very different even in Indiana, one of the smallest states west of the East Coast states. You would think that, but it's very different across Indiana, let alone across the whole country on the resources in every different area. Yeah, lack of creative planning. I love that. I mean, I don't love it because it's a bad problem, but I love that as an answer, because we do have to be very creative in the way that we organize and plan for these community trips and into including students. And we're going to talk a little bit too about sometimes we just got to do it and start putting stuff off and just do it. But it takes really careful planning to do it right. And community not understanding the youth given disabilities. Yeah, depending on the area, there is some areas that are really good, and some areas you got to do a lot of community. Part of including youth is working with the community too. It's not just working with students. You got to be a representative and an advocate for those students, and that includes working in the community. So all really good information. Let me see here. I forgot to get on here, and with Menti, sometimes you gotta update it. So there are some issues that are specific to transition age youth. Thinking about, especially the students in the age range from 18 to 22, is they are not high school students. And we don't need to treat them that way. It's different. We need to treat them like the age they are. And a lot of students their age, they're either going to college or tech schools, and we need to treat them like that. They're not the same as high school students, and we shouldn't be having students stay in that high school till 7 or 8 years if they're going to be in till they're 22. The community should be the classroom. It's not just the building, and you need to use the whole community, and it's whatever community they're in. It's a lot of different experiences you can have in the community. And thinking about students, it kind of that in between. They're not quite high school and not quite fully ready for the adult world. So we need to have different programming for those students. In staffing becomes very difficult, because to do this, it either takes more staff or, like someone else said, creative planning. How are we going to really think about how we're going to have staff all over the community to help supporting students all over? And what we talked about before was talking about, somebody said it was transportation. And the two that I think that really get in the way that you have to really think about and schedule are lunch, or just eating, how you're going to make sure the student gets lunch while they're out there working in the community and having experiences in the community, and also transportation. So then those are some of the problems. What are we going to do about it? In thinking about the two areas that we're talking about, including students in the school and in the community, the school, thinking about the school environment, we want our students in everything else that every other student's doing. So you're using the whole school environment. You want to make sure same age peers with school, and that's easy to do because they're with their same age peers. And there's academic and extracurricular activities. So it's not just including them in the school day. How do we include them with all the experiences that everybody had in high school and middle school? How do we include them in all those other activities too? What's a little bit different in the community is, instead of just the school environment, it is the whole world. It's their whole community. And really, for teachers and educators, got to think a little bit differently about that. Is the classroom, is everywhere you're going. And it's a little bit different with people too. Instead of same age peers, whenever you're working with the community, there's strangers, acquaintances, coworkers, friends. And it's really important that students develop those skills on how to interact with all those different social groups. And community-based activities. Once you're in the community, everything is community-based and you're all out there. I think it's really important for those programs, whenever they do start for those 18 to 22, that they're never even connected to the school if you can. They never report back to the school. You have a totally community-based program. It does take a lot of inventive, creative planning, but that's what every other of their peers are doing too. So whenever we're talking about that in-school group, include them in general education always. We're going to talk about how we do some of this, but for all students, and whenever I mean all, I do mean all. Sometimes whenever people say all, they're kind of cutting out those students with the most significant disabilities. It's 2021. We've been talking inclusion now for so many years that by 2021, we should know what we mean. And we're talking all students. All students, no matter what their disability is and how significant, should be included all day. And I know that's very difficult. I didn't tell you my full background, but I'm a teacher. And if somebody asks me what I do, I still say that's what I am. I'm a teacher. So I've been here. In my background, I was teaching students with moderate and severe disabilities in transition programs and in high school. And that's what we need to do. All the research shows that the most predictor of success after high school, one of the biggest predictors of that, were students that were included all day in general ed. So there's ways to do that, but again, some creative staffing is what helps. And important to use that IEP. So how do we write supports and accommodations into the IEP that'll help that student be successful while they are included all day? There's also CTE is career technical ed programs. A lot of other schools are connected with different CTE programs where students get great experiences about voc tech. It depends on the CTE program. Some of them are more auto-based and then welding, or they can even pick vet and nursing and things like that. But being connected with a CTE and then not being afraid to have students with disabilities go to those programs too. They're not just for general ed students, include all students in those. And then another one that I think is a big benefit for in-school inclusion is peer tutors, or using some of their same age peers. Because using those students to help support them in the classroom or academic sometimes is better than using us as adults. Sometimes they will follow their peer tutors a little more than us. And a good, strong peer tutor program, if you see those in schools, a lot of times they're successful with inclusion. What's a little different in the post-school for those students age 18 to 22, whenever I'm saying don't do it, I'm talking about school. So once they've been in school for their 4 years of high school, and now they're in that age group from 18 to 22, we shouldn't be including them in high school. But what I mean by that is not including them in general. Now they should be included in their community. They should be out all their time in the community, in a job, in learning experiences in there, maybe in the local college, things like that. There are programs, many more programs now for students that graduated with a certificate to still have those experiences on a college campus. Think College is a great nationwide organization that really supports these programs for students on certificate in a college campus. Since all other students are either in that, that's where students with disabilities should be too. And really it just takes, since you're gonna have so many students in the community, it just takes repositioning some staffing sometimes, instead of they're in the school, just to help support them in the community. Our attitude has to be, and a belief, and then you got to follow that belief that all students will be included in general education and community always, and then never go for that, and never change from that. All students, and then it's just about finding a way. So give me this, you can type in chat or go to the Menti and answer this question, but what are some ways that you have, give me some examples of some ways that you have included students with disabilities in the community? Not talking so much school now, but in the community, just some examples. We have one on there. Somebody already has trips for practice grocery shopping. What are some other ways that you've included students in the community? And feel free to use chat too, if you'd rather. Somebody has in their chat public transportation training. That has been really huge, and obviously in an area where you have that, is very important. Something that in a program that I worked with, what was important, how we started using only public transportation. So for any student that was in the transition program, we only used public transportation. And how we got that done was that all of our community trips, it actually saves money for the school. At least in this situation it did. And I think in most cases it was, because we were using a school bus to go everywhere. Literally, there's a Walmart across the street from the high school, and it took like $50 out of the budget every time I sent a small group to Walmart. But then whenever we used the public transportation area, it was $1 a student. So I really suggest, if you want to start using that, which is great experience for the student, public transportation, get up the chart so you can show it to your administrators and school board. We went to a school board meeting, and you have to show, look, it's going to save you, it saved the school district $17,000 a year to use the public transportation over the school buses. So sometimes you got to, talking about creative ways, you got to figure out ways to kind of show, and unfortunately, a lot of things come down to money. If you can show you're saving the school district money, that always helps. There's a bunch on here I'm seeing. Job sites, job shadowing, leisure outings. Yeah, service learning. Service learning is such a big part of schools now. So another thing that's really important is to connect this to policies and procedures you already have in your school. So things like service learning, since that's a big thing in schools right now, you connect that to, well, we're doing this to connect with our schools program to increase service learning. And that helps get that done. Weekly Walmart trips, theater trips, proms, dances. It's all good stuff. And plus, isn't it just fun as a teacher? I mean, it's fun for us too, isn't it? To get out in the community and do that, it always seems better. Allowing a small amount of public in at a time. Sometimes that's good. I also like to just have things as natural as what they usually are. So in other words, I don't like to shut down a place. If it's usually open with people, I want it to be like that so I can actually work on that with the students. And that way they can go there after school hours and they're learning how to do that. Trips to restaurants, it's all good stuff. Not getting along on the Minty. We have to have this philosophy in a program. And really, whenever we're talking about including students, you really need a program. You need something official that this is our program or our philosophy on how we're going to include students in the community. And you have to have that belief that students are better served in the community, and then follow that and don't change from it. Yeah, somebody just pointed in the chat, doctors and dentists becoming more accommodating, which is true. That's huge. So great ways for students to learn is to take them to a doctor's appointment, take them to a dentist, set it up beforehand and let them experience that. So it's not such a challenging thing. Some student with any disability, but sometimes especially with autism, going to some of those appointments can be almost traumatic. So practice some of those things beforehand is very helpful. Yes, and then Kathleen actually commented that we're not only teaching the students, a lot of times we're teaching the community. And I don't know how many times some of you that have been doing this, been teaching for as long as I have, I'm sure you've been out in the community and you've had somebody from the community talking up and almost praising you for something that you don't, you're like, this is what we're doing. We're out here, it's not that big of a deal, but they try to give you that praise like you're something special. And that always kind of annoys me, truthfully. I guess I should take it as a compliment, but we're teaching the community while we're out there. Next, I'm going to go through a few just points that to kind of, whenever you're thinking about that program that you need and the philosophy of including students in the community, and just do it is the first one that I have here. It has to do with your attitude and celebrating success. But I call it the Nike shoe, ad. That sometimes if we can put off and plan things forever and ever and ever, and there's never going to be a great time to do it. And sometimes we just got to go ahead and go. And so after a while, just do it. And also something else that I think is important. The next point on that is that I think sometimes as special ed teachers, we almost don't celebrate or don't act as much as other teachers do or other educators, that we absolutely know what we're doing. We are the professionals, and sometimes we have to act like it. So know that you're doing good work with students is very important, and then take them out there. And as you give back, talk with your administrators about the success you're having. The more success that they know you're having, the more that they're going to be okay with you doing more and more what some people consider outrageous, but it's really not. It's just that some people have a harder time letting those programs develop until they see some success. Relationships. You're not going to be able to go anywhere unless you start with relationships first. And you have to build those with all the different stakeholders: parents, students, coworkers, administrators, and community members. Very important to kind of work on relationships with the community members since you're going to be out in it. Always find your one cheerleader, which you got to find an administrator in your school that really gets what you're trying to do, and then stick with that person. And that's the person you go to that's going to try to get the other administrators to kind of okay whatever you're planning on doing. Those relationships are important also with parents. In some situations, parents can be a little worried. Whenever you're trying to do a trip to who knows what, sometimes they get a little worried. So that trust is very important. And really, I talked about this a second ago, but celebrate those small successes and make sure everybody in the school knows about it. You have a student go out that maybe they're a little worried with some significant disability, and they go out and they start being really successful, then that's what you got to make sure that news gets out and that your administration knows about it. And be proud of yourself, because it is a challenge. Not everybody can do what we do. So be proud whenever you get out and then celebrate it. And I really like this quote about being a crazy one. You might have seen it before, it's around, but in 1997, Apple had this whole Think Different campaign. And I think this is a main philosophy and attitude we need to have as special educators on whenever we're really trying to push things a little bit in our school. But here's to the crazy ones: the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pigs in the square holes. The ones who see things differently are not fond of rules. They push the human race forward, and while some may see them as crazy ones, we see genius, because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones that do. So we have to have that attitude as we're trying to include students in the community, which it shouldn't be that push. It shouldn't be that out there, but sometimes in some schools, we really have to be that one. You know what? I'm going to stop sharing just for a minute because I'm not sure I shared my sound, and I need to share my sound for a minute, but I'm going to share again and then make sure I got my sound going. Okay. And I'm going to show a quick video that I think that connects with this really well. You might have seen it before, it's another video, but it really connects well to what we have to do sometimes to really start programs like this.
If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. So it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out and you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut and it's not two nuts. 3 is a crowd and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute, you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've...
So just a little bit about how sometimes whenever you're trying to do this, you're going to feel like the dancing guy with no shirt. Or sometimes we got to be that next person. You already have somebody in your school that's doing that. You need to be the next person to support them and go. And sometimes we just have to do that. And that's what really starts something good. And sometimes when doing this, like again, like I say, this shouldn't be all that ordinary. It's kind of sad in some ways that it is that ordinary, that just including students, we have to feel like the dancing guy with no shirt. But sometimes we have to be that person to get things going. The next thing to think about is developing your team. So whenever you're trying to include students, you have to have support. And these are some of the people you have. You have to have administrative support. So if you are the administrator, then sometimes you need to go up within the district-wide administration and get the support from there. If you're the teacher, then find that person that can be that. And in years, things rotate through years. Sometimes you'll have great administrative support, and then truthfully, sometimes you're going to have years where you might go where you just don't feel supported in that way. So in those years, then it's not, I don't want to say you got to work around the administration, but you find ways to get the job done by still trying to find either one person, finding other teachers that can at least group together where you can explain what you're trying to do and why it's so important to get out in the community with your students. Other teachers, I like to think of the classroom assistants, job coaches, and paraprofessionals as like in that video, the second people. Once you get that second person to come in and start following you and believing in you, then that's when things happen. And you have to really have trust with these people. So because going out in the community, they're the ones doing a lot of the direct care in the community. And so they have to believe in what you're doing, because you're going to want them to follow your goals, your IEPs, your plan for what's happening. So very important to get a great group of classroom assistants and job coaches. And sometimes what I found on that too is schools try to hire, sometimes they want people already with experience, and that is good, but sometimes you just need to find the right person, and you can teach them. I'd much rather have somebody that kind of gets it philosophy-wise, that I can teach you how to work with students with disabilities. If you can just come along with me on what I believe philosophy, that sometimes is more important than somebody that has the background that maybe might not believe in how important it is to get in the community. So another thing I like to do, you should definitely kind of be a part of working with your administration on the hiring. And if you can, explain how important that is. And sometimes whenever they've hired for me and just put them in there, it's not so good. And then parents, something to get, some of the coolest things that I ever got done community-wise on using public transportation, on being a part, there's a YMCA that's close that we started. Instead of just going to the gym, our students would go to the YMCA in the community because they were already outside of high school. They shouldn't go to the high school gym anymore. Different things like that all got done because I got a parent fired up about it. So work with your parents and really have them support, because sometimes whenever you get them to support, it's easier once they push. Sometimes they listen to parents, sometimes a little more than they do teachers. Did you have something on that, Kathleen?
Yeah. I'm a parent of a child that has severe cerebral palsy, and he doesn't walk, he doesn't talk, he's fed through a G tube, he is in diapers, and he's 26, almost 27, but he's really, really smart, and he has a Dynavox with a head switch, and he's been able to be real mouthy, with kind of smart aleck remarks with that Dynavox. It's has been in repair for over a year, and we just got it back. So we'll see how it works as he gets back used to it. But it was so powerful when Eli had a great team with an awesome teacher that got him out in the community every single day, with a paraprofessional that I, felt comfortable with. Sometimes I'd pay out of pocket to have somebody that I felt really comfortable with when there wasn't that person. Often there's great turnover with the paraprofessionals, but it helps us as family members too. The more our kids are out in the communities, not just for them having great experiences, but really to educate that community. And I can't emphasize that enough. I can't tell you the number of times I've taken Eli to a restaurant and some rude person, I think the rudest person asked us to leave. "You're ruining our meal. I can't believe that you're feeding him through his G-tube." That's how he eats. And he has to sit there and probably smell all the things he wished he could eat through his mouth. But had that person been used to differences in eating, that would be really great. Or at the movie theater, people would get up and leave and move to another space. And, that's one of those things that at first used to hurt my feelings, and then it used to make me mad. And after a while, I learned to just say, "Hey, would you like to know about my child and what his differences are? Because he really loves this movie, or he really loves this restaurant, or he just loves being around people," which is the real truth. And the more that the community is exposed to that, they are educated and they are better community members. And it has worked in my community, because I often get phone calls and messages from people that I haven't seen in years, but they're used to seeing Eli out. "Hey, I just wanted to know, I saw a cool thing happening with your kid today," or even a warning. Somebody was texting and driving while they were driving Eli in the van, so you might want to jump on that. And it just seems like this great community of helpers. So it's so much, it's about safety. It's about acceptance. It's about not minding differences and letting everybody be in that. And I know you all know that, but it really is very, very important part of it. So that's why I wanted to jump in. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Also, and we talked about it earlier, so another important group on this, and just something that I've seen that's been a huge help, is those peer tutors or same age peers somehow connected with them. So as they go in the community, especially whenever they're in those now 18 to 22-year-old programs, college students, there's all kinds of service things you can do there, but instead of making it a service project, I like it whenever they're just connected with them because they want to. And you usually can find that a lot easier than what people realize. It's not so hard for the students and the kids to do this stuff, to understand why they're included, is what it is for adults, truthfully. We got to work a lot harder on getting adults to believe it. To students, it just should be done that way. It's not a question to them. So having peer tutors do it, and students follow them sometimes more than us. So having them in the community, and if you can't get them to go on community trips and the school lets them out, that is a huge, huge help. And of course, you want to have some decent ones, some students you can trust, but they learn a lot from this too. Some of the best peer tutors I've had are now teachers. They were peer tutors with me before, and so now they're carrying that on. So they learn a lot too. They're there to learn, but it's a really big help to have in community-based programs. The other thing you need to do is really have a mission. And I used to be one of those too that like, oh, here we go, talk about a mission statement. We got to develop something. But it's absolutely necessary if you're going to have students in the community to have a mission for your program and then follow it. So as just an example, here's a belief statement, a mission and belief statement. So just, maybe one of your belief statements would be something similar to this, that all students deserve the opportunity to learn in an environment that will provide authentic experiences and real world opportunities. That was one of our belief statements, not our mission, but that's really important. You want to have these lists and then follow them. So talking about your beliefs and mission, once you develop, make sure that they're official by having your administration look at them and sign off on them. That way they know that you're doing this. And then whenever something comes up, like you're trying to take a community trip, you're like, well, here's our mission and belief statements that you signed off on, last year. So it's not out of the ordinary. You said that we were going to do it. So here you go. Something else I don't have on here, but I think is really important on a mission statement for a program is connect it to your school district's mission statement. All school districts have a mission statement. And a lot of times they will include words like, we believe all students deserve opportunities, and all students, they point those out a lot. So then whenever you use that, you can connect it to their school district's mission statement. And again, then whenever there's a question about what you're trying to do in the community, well, it's part of our school district's mission statement and our program's mission statement. That's why I'm doing it. So connect it to your school district's mission statement. Make sure you post them. They need to be posted somewhere. So all your staff, all the peer tutors, every parents that come in your room, everybody sees them and knows these are what we believe. And this is what we're going to do. And then always follow them. There's never a time where you don't follow them. Don't say, well, these are our mission statements except for this student. There isn't one student that doesn't get to be a part of that. Every student is a part of that. So make sure you always follow them once they're developed. Very important to know your students and know the community. If you're going to really include students all the time in the community, you want to really be prepared. So I know that kind of seems, well, yeah, I would want to be prepared. But if you can, know the place before you go a little bit. Think about your students, maybe sensory issues, different behavioral issues, and kind of just be ready for that. Ready for the student that maybe has issues with dealing with crowds. Obviously, no, you're going to go to the mall where there's going to be a crowd there, but maybe have way outs. If there's just a sensory issue and they can't deal, know where you're going to take that student. Very important. I always, wherever I'm out in the trip, I know that one thing I do know, I always know where the closest restroom is. So that would be a big one to know. And not only the closest restroom, if you have students in wheelchairs, maybe with some other needs, know the closest place you can take them if you need a changing table or if you need something more advanced. And then Donald Rumsfeld, I always just call this to think like Rumsfeld. If you remember it's a bunch of, everything seems a few years ago now, but a bunch of years ago, whenever he was with the Bush administration, he kind of got made fun of for a funny quote he said about the known knowns and the unknown unknowns, the things that we don't know. And that's what I like to think of whenever I take a group in the community. I don't want to have anything that I don't know that I don't know. I want to know things and I want to be ready for whatever might happen. So we just used to call that the Rumsfeld, that we're gonna know what before we go out what might happen. And then also though, with that, you'll prepare for every single thing, and the one thing you didn't prepare for, that's what will happen. So don't beat yourself up about that too. They're learning experiences. So whenever things happening, not only does your student learn, the community might learn, and you just kind of next time know what to do. So it's just an example. I'm not going to go through all these because we're running out of time, but as an example, I just thought a couple, and I'm going to have you, if you've ever had an experience in the community where you weren't prepared, I'll ask for an example here, but just as a couple, one time I had a student at Walmart and he was gone, couldn't find him. And later on, all of a sudden I'm panicked. He comes out and he had got his hair cut up at the front of Walmart, just went in there, asked for a haircut. He had real long hair and he comes out with a buzz because he went in, sat down in the chair, they cut his hair. So I had to call the parents and say, I'm sorry, not only did I lose your son for a few minutes, he ran and somehow got away from my staff and got his haircut. So what had happened was every time he went to Walmart, his parents would take him a lot of times to get a haircut while they finished shopping. They didn't care at all. They said they thought it was funny, luckily, and it was okay. But it's because that was his routine there. So check with your students about their routines before you go to a community trip. It was his routine to always get his haircut there. I didn't know that. So that would be a good thing to know. And then we won't talk about Milk and Mayhem or downhill school busing now, but the hot possum. I had a teacher once that talked about this on a community trip they were at Brown County, out in which is a wooded area, like a state park. They went out and a student came off the bus and was yelling about a hot possum on the bus a hot possum on the bus. So the staff are telling all the students to get off the bus and how a possum got on the bus. Anyways, the student was yelling so loud that they were saying hurt person. So kind of understand that whenever your students are kind of excited too on there, you might want them to slow down and really trying to understand what they're saying. It was a hurt person, not a hot possum. But what about you? Anybody else have an experience where you learned something on a community trip? Put it in chat real quick. Something you learned on the community that you weren't quite prepared for? Or maybe something that you're worried about. Is there something that you're worried about before you take students and really work hard on the community all day long? What kind of things are you worried about before you do that? Lost a student in a corn maze? I've heard of that a few times. At least you know they're in the maze. So, you know, it's not like, you know, hopefully they can't get out too far. To have students wear a badge with the school information. Yes, very important. That's a great tip. So whenever you go out, especially for your students that might be nonverbal, you want to have some good information out there. Before you do community trips too, that's some good training that you want to go through students. If you got lost, what would you do? Who can you talk to? And review that with them. And while you're on community trips, literally show it to them. Sometimes they don't understand whatever you just tell them in the classroom. But if you can go out in the community and say, okay, we're at Target. If you ever got lost here and didn't find your people, see these people in the Target vest, go talk to them. Or go up, show them where the office is in all department stores. If they're at the park, review with them. What do you do if you all of a sudden didn't have your people around? Who can you talk to? A lot of we started a program at a college, and one thing that we did, and this was with grant money, I understand, but something that was really helpful is all of our students got a cell phone. So, and we taught them how to use that because they would go out in the community a lot, and we'd just be based at the college. They'd be all over, but we taught them about cell phones. So if they didn't already have one, they got a cell phone where they could call us right away. Car sickness, that sounds like not fun, but yeah. On community trips, you might want to wonder about on long trips, especially kind of be thinking about some of your students and maybe where they sit and that. Car sickness does not sound like something I'd want to deal with on a nice community trip. So. The next thing I wanted to talk about, and we're getting short on time, so can I go through this fast? But use the IEP. So in the transition services section of an IEP, right there, you're going to do community trips. Now, what I suggest is if this is going to be something new in your administration, I would talk to your administration first, because that might be a good way to give a principal a little bit of a worry if you start writing stuff in IEPs like that. But it should be in there. I'm not saying it shouldn't be in there. I'm just saying this might be something you work with your administration with before you give them a heart attack. But write in the services about how you're going to do community experiences to support each of those post-secondary goals in the areas of employment, education, training, and independent living. Transition assessments. Write up an observation of how your student's doing in a community trip. That can be a transition assessment. And I think sometimes those are more beneficial than sometimes those written ones that we just do forms that we find online that's some official thing. Write up an observation. Write how the student's doing whenever he's at the bank, whenever he's at a restaurant. So annual goals. So very important that you write skill-based and measurable annual goals, but you can have them. They don't all have to be academic. Write annual goals that will address community training. So here's just a few examples to think about, like given a daily schedule of work, recreation, and transportation, student will use the schedule to report to the correct transportation pickup spot site, and then make it measurable however you want. But there's an annual goal that's addressing transportation. So for some students, that's really important. Then the bottom one about a student initiating a conversation with people in the community. given a rehearsal, so you've worked on 3 different ways to start a conversation. Student will initiate a conversation with a stranger. So writing these things that all connect in the services, the assessments, and the annual goals in an IEP is another good way to include your students in the community, because once it gets an IEP, it becomes official. So what kind of questions do you have? So I kind of went through the end there, especially with the IEP quickly, but you can either use the Menti to write down questions or put it in the chat, any questions you might have. That can't be all good. There had to be something I sped through and didn't explain.
There you go, Mike. Here's a question. Do you have a list of
Okay.
things you have done in the past for community projects?
For me personally, I mean, I don't have one list of all the things I've done in community. I mean, I could talk about a bunch that I'm most proud of, and that would probably be a good thing to do, is if I just kept a list of that. But some things that I've done in the community that I think helped the most was the college-based program for students that were 18 to 22. Whenever they weren't in high school anymore, once they hit 18, they were based out of the local college we have. And we had 2 sister programs. One is, because not all students go to college either, but we had another program that was just community-based and then the college-based. And having those both just in those locations was very helpful. And probably my favorite thing that I've done as a teacher was helping to start that college-based program, because we saw students, it not only helped while the students were there and just being based there, it gave a goal. Like every other student has a goal of going to college. Our students with the most significant disabilities, to get into the program, they had to meet certain criteria. So it actually helped in elementary, middle school, and high school, because the teachers had to up their game, because it gave them a goal. Instead of just we graduate with the students with significant disabilities and there wasn't an after goal, now they had one. So that really helped. And some of the best ones were just, and I know I talked about the mall some, but there's a mall close to us. There's so much to learn at the mall, especially for students that have sensory issues. So we practiced, there's going to be a crowd here, Jeremy. This is what we're going to do. And we always, once they trust you, your students, they'll do a lot of stuff with you. But as long as they trust you that, look, if you're having a problem, we're going to get out right away. And then, so I suggest that, and never don't try a place. Like even don't let a place not scare you away or scare your students away. They might not have had that experience before, but they'll really learn it a lot.
Krista, I did a program very similar to Mike's in another state, and some of the community projects we did were food pantries, helped out at church outings. We went to local elementary schools, did some daycare work. We helped out in the parks, cleaning up the city. We helped wash the transportation of the city, the cars for the city workers. We did a variety of things. We did a poll of what our students were interested in and what interested them in maybe learning the skill for a future employment opportunity. And so that's how we based our community projects.
Another good one is actually just the local hospital, which it sounds weird just to have a community trip there, but I think it helps students. We would do a little tour like once a year of the hospital, and it would show them the ER, which I know sounds strange, but to go in there and just say, hey, if you ever go here, this is how it works. This is what they're doing. And then we would eat in the cafeteria and we'd walk around and look at different parts of that. That was like a really good trip where I think a lot was learned. Any place will let you do a trip. Any place you could think of, you could set up stuff. And it ends up being pretty.
Amy has her hand up. Amy Zimmer has her hand up. Amy, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to, thank Mike for his thoroughness in the topic discussion. And I just wanted to say that I coordinated with the 2 Logan services specialists that we have in our building. So always reach out to those resources you have in your building. Although we have a work experience program, I wanted to do something with them in the evening. So we actually had a volunteer experience where we packaged up food at our food rescue facility in the community, and they welcomed us each and every month. We went as a trial and they welcomed us every month, and we did that for a course of 2 years, and we packed almost 5,000 meals.
That's great.
So continue to reach out, and maybe it's beyond the school day. You know, just to continue to think outside the box, like you suggested, I think is important.
And I'm a big outside the box for anything. That's like, yes, that's what these students need. And we would do a camping trip too, which it was a ton. I'm not kidding. We had what was called intensive for a week. You could do something different in between the 2 semesters. And we would bring half peer tutors and half our students. And that was an adventure, and they would learn so much. So for a week, we stayed in cabins out in the middle of a state park. And we had all kinds of activities planned every day, but that was a huge, huge thing where they learned the most. I will say though, I would never been so tired in my life, because there's no sleeping where you got 40 high schoolers staying in cabins all around the state park. But they learned more there in that week than probably the rest of the year.
That's amazing. I incorporated the peer leaders and they went with us in the evenings. And then I created an authentic assessment that was a reflection of their Cultivate Food Rescue experience. And then that was part of their, you know, transition artifacts and portfolio.
And that's just like what I was saying earlier, that anybody that's done a lot of community trips and that's successful and that showed a lot of that, I think peer tutors are always a huge part of that. So you said that too. So I always, any kind of peer tutor program is really big.
Yeah.
So,
Mike, Melissa has something in the chat, and she's talked about in what we're talking about flexibility and being flexible. She was definitely flexible during COVID by utilizing their local pizza restaurant. They were able to partner with them and video them making pizzas during COVID, and the students watched them and then made pizzas, and then the restaurant owner donated pizzas for the students to make at the school. So what a great opportunity to be flexible.
And and I'm totally, if it's okay, going to copy this example, because we get a lot of questions about with COVID on well, we can't do this stuff because of COVID, and what a great way to do it with COVID and still make a learning experience out of it. So that is awesome. And even though hopefully we're coming out of, I need to knock on wood, we're coming out of COVID a little bit, it looks like, so hopefully we can get more on this community stuff going again. There's still other reasons why things come up where you can't go out. So just having some things where you can explain things like that, like what to do whenever you can't get out, like that is awesome.